Hello friends, I am Professor Smita Jha from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. We are doing health humanities and disability. We are discussing graphic autopathography. Graphic medicine is one of the important components of health humanities. Graphic autopathography is the very important aspects, you can say, theory of health humanities or medical humanities. So, graphic autopathography is a subgenre of graphic medicine that combines autobiographical storytelling with visual art, such as comics or graphic novels, to document an author's personal experience with illness, disability, or trauma. The term autopathography was originally coined by G. Thomas Causer to describe the patient's tale in literature. When these accounts take the form of comics or visual narratives, they are termed graphic autopathographies. Graphic autopathography is defined by its ability to represent the subjective lived experience of illness through a hybrid language of words and images. It moves beyond medical facts to capture how a condition fundamentally transforms a person's identity and daily life. Now, what are the key characteristics of graphic autopathographies? The first is visual verbal hybrid. It uses the specialized properties of comics, such as panels and gutters, the space between panels, to represent the fragmented nature of illness. Second is embodiment. A central theme is how the sick body is visually represented, often literalizing metaphors to show internal pain or mental states, like drawing a head as a case of rats to represent anxiety. It uses the specific language of comics, panel speech bubbles, and gutters, the space between panels, to show meanings that neither text nor image could convey alone. The central focus is the corporealized extreme, where the author's physical or mental brutalization is visually depicted to show how it alters their negotiation of home and work spaces. Third is counter discourse. These narratives often challenge the dominant medical gaze by prioritizing the patient's subjective lived experience over objective clinical data. These works act as a co-discourse to official medical records, contesting dominant biomedical narratives and humanizing the patient's voice. Agency and stigma. Creating these works is seen as a way for authors to reclaim agency and burst the social stigma associated with their conditions. By documenting their own suffering, authors reclaim agency in the face of medical system and work to destigmatize conditions that are often socially misunderstood. Fifth is dual perspective. Creators often depict two versions of themselves simultaneously. The narrative one, the current self telling the story, often in captions, and the narrative two, the past self experiencing the illness shown in the drawings. Visual metaphors, abstract feeling like pain, anxiety, or depression, are transformed into concrete images. For example, depression represented as a black dog or a blanket of darkness. Non-linear temporality. Illness is often represented through disjointed panels and non-linear storytelling to reflect the fragmented nature of traumatic memory and chronic suffering. Now, let us discuss the functional elements of graphic autopathography. There are two functional elements of graphic autopathography, and these are: first is seamless integration. Clinical information like charts or biological explanations is often folded directly into the personal story to anchor subjective experiences in medical reality. Second is stylistic choices. The choice of line quality, that is, a sketchy versus clean, color and shading, can communicate the emotional tone of an illness better than dialogue alone. If we talk of visual verbal hybridity in graphic autobiography in detail, this refers to the interplay between images and text, where neither medium is subordinate to the other. Instead, they work together to create meaning that neither could convey alone. In this medium, words and pictures dance together to provide a multisensory experience that captures the complexities of memory and identity. If we explore core mechanisms of visual verbal hybridity, then the first comes non synchronous storytelling, and this is rather than just illustrating the text, images can tell a different part of the story or offer a contrasting perspective, requiring the reader to actively negotiate between the two tracks. Interdependence, meaning emerges from the gap between what is seen and what is read. For example, a caption might describe a peaceful day while the drawing shows internal anxiety, forcing the reader to synthesize these conflicting truths. Visualizing the invisible, hybridity allows authors to literalize abstract emotions. A narrator may speak calmly in text bubbles, while the visual art depicts them drawing or walking on air, making internal state visible and visceral. Specializing time, the use of panels and gutters allows authors to show the passage of time or simultaneous moments on a single page, which is particularly effective for representing fragmented traumatic memories. If we talk of strategic storytelling techniques, the first is juxtaposition, placing words and images side by side to create resonance or distance, allowing readers to decide which element to focus on first. Braiding, integrating visual threads into a traditional text essay format or vice versa to add layers of symbolism and metaphor. Typography and lettering. The physical appearance of the text, font, size, style carries its own visual meaning, conveying a character's voice, emotion, or social standing. Dual narration. Authors often depict their younger past self through drawing the narrated, while their current present self provide the commentary through caption, the narrating eye. Counter discourse in graphic medicine. In graphic medicine, counter discourse refers to the use of comics and graphic memoirs to challenge, subvert, and provide alternatives to dominant medical and cultural narratives of illness. It functions as a tool for patients to reclaim agency by moving away from clinical, often depersonalized, objective viewpoints and towards lived, subjective experience. If we talk of key functions of counter discourse, graphic medicine creates a counter narrative by disrupting traditional power structure in several ways. The first is subverting stereotypes. Graphic illness memoir, such as those focusing on mental health, critique normative behaviors, and challenge depiction of patients as violent and imbecile, often found in popular media. Restoring language. These narratives restore the language of illness to the sufferer, allowing them to define their own truths rather than relying on the rigid, linear structures of medical dogma. Challenging the medical model. In fields like autism studies, comics help healthcare professionals question traditional medical models by highlighting the neurodiversity and personal identities of autistic individuals. Visualizing the subjective. Unlike medical illustrations that aim for anatomical accuracy, comics use metaphor, humor, abstraction to articulate internal feelings that prose alone cannot capture. Fifth is addressing socio-political systems. Some works like Rachel Lindsay's RX critique the political economy of healthcare, exposing how insurance and pharmaceutical corporations can commoditize health. Embodiment in graphic autopathography or graphic medicine, and this refers to the explicit visual and narrative representation of the lived experience of illness, transforming the body from a mere medical object into a subjective, often fractured site of identity. It captures the changing physical, emotional self through the graphic body on the page, bridging the gap between clinical data and personal reality. Embodiment in graphic autopathography refers to the visual and narrative manifestation of the ill or disabled body on the comic page, transforming the physical self into a canvas for expressing personal suffering and identity. Now, let us see the key aspects of embodiment in graphic autopathography. The graphic body and subjectivity. The visual nature of comics allows authors to represent the lived body, an experience of health, illness that is subjective, visceral, and often unrepresentable in words alone. Visualizing the invisible, graphic memoirs use visual metaphors, colors, and panel structure to convey internal states such as chronic pain, neurological distress, or mental health struggle, which are otherwise hard to communicate. Third is reclaiming agency by creating a self portrait that includes the body in crisis. Authors reclaim agency and redefine their identity, challenging the victim narrative in medical settings. Challenging the medical gaze. These works often counter the sterile clinical view of the body pathography by focusing on the mundane, messy, and emotional aspect of being ill. Embodied affect in a style. The artistic style, whether chaotic, simplistic, or visceral, acts as a direct extension of the author's emotional and physical state. If we talk of core concepts of embodiment, graphic autopathography, which is a subgenre of autobiographical comics focused on illness, uses the medium's unique properties to explore the embodied self. This exploration is undertaken through different ideas and concepts such as the body as canvas. In these narratives, the protagonist's body is literalized on the page, serving as the primary site where internal pain meets external reality. Second is decentered identity. Authors often represent themselves through multiple shifting versions of their body to reflect how illness unmakes and remakes their sense of self. Lived versus medical body, it distinguishes between the medical body, an object of clinical inquiry, and the lived body, the subjective experience of inhabiting a body in crisis. Impact on patient agency. What is this? So, by utilizing spatiotopia, the arrangement of panels and space, and visual verbal synergy, graphic medicine provides a safe space for authors to examine the oscillation between standardized medical modes and their own identity. This allows marginalized groups, including queer, trans, and neurodivergent individuals, to recenter their experiences from footnotes to full pages, fostering a sense of community engagement and empowerment. Graphic medicine, the intersection of comics and healthcare, actively subverts medical and social stereotypes by using personal visual narratives to challenge dominant, often dehumanizing depictions of illness. Through autobiographical comics, pathographies, creators directly counter stereotypes surrounding mental illness, cancer, and disability, reclaiming their identities from clinical reductive discourses. Now, key ways graphic medicine subverts stereotype, and the first point is challenging mental illness stereotypes. Graphic memoirs like Ellen Fornes, Marbles, and Rachel Lindsay's RX disrupt stereotypes that equates mental illness with violence or incompetence, replacing them with nuanced subjective experiences of mania, depression, and neurodivergence. Second is redefining disability and chronic illness. Works such as Dana Walrath's Alzheimer's move away from viewing dementia as brain dead or zombie like, instead, portraying it through a lens of imagination, creativity, and interdependence. Humanizing ugly illness. Graphic narrative about cancer break the taboo around and destigmatize diseases often ignored in public discourse. Critiquing medical authority, graphic medicine frequently critique the paternalism of biomedical models, giving voice to patient experiences and promoting narrative humility over strict, detached, clinical, and often patriarchal viewpoints. Challenging gendered and social views. By using the infinite canvas of digital and print media, creators use visual metaphors to challenge social biases, such as those surrounding feminized pain, chronic pain is a party, or to provide a counter discourse to medical, media driven, and popular narratives. Graphic medicine turns the spotlight on the patient's perspective, using the unique combination of words and images to foster empathy and understanding, which can improve clinical education and patient care. Graphic medicine subverts stereotypes by using the visual and narrative power of comics to provide a counter discourse to reductive biomedical and cultural portrayals of illness. By centering first person lived experiences, often called pathographies, this field reclaims the patient's voice, moving beyond labels like victim or patient to showcase complex, multifaceted identities. Graphic medicine, the intersection of comics and healthcare, actively subvert medical and social stereotypes by using personal visual narratives to challenge dominant, often dehumanizing depictions of illness. Through autobiographical comics, creators directly counter stereotypes surrounding mental illness, cancer, and disability, reclaiming their identities from clinical reductive discourses. How graphic medicine challenges stereotype, restoring patient agency. It replaces the prone and helpless clinical stereotype with active narratives where patients critique healthcare system and medical ableism. Humanizing mental illness, works like Ellen Forney's Marble use visual metaphors to challenge the deviant or violent stereotype often seen in popular media, depicting mental health conditions with nuance and empathy, breaking the empty cell narrative. In dementia studies, graphic memoirs like Dana Walrath's Alzheimer's subvert the stereotype of Alzheimer's patient as zombies by representing them as perceptive and imaginative individuals. Decentering dominant narratives, newer anthologies and webcomics specifically work to decenter white neurotypical narratives, ensuring that marginalized voices, including those facing HIV, AIDS, or disability, are visible and heard. Challenging superhero ness, it also interrogates the hero stereotype of doctors and surgeons, examining the power dynamics and superiority complexes that can exist within the medical profession. Visual metaphors for invisible pain. Authors use unique imagery such as black scribble cloud for eating disorder in Katie Green's Lighter Than My Shadow, or an illustrated buzzing bee for anxiety and OCD in Growing Pangs to convey complex emotions that words alone often fail to capture. Sanity is a performance. Memoirs like Rachel Lindsay RX challenge the rigid binary of sane, insane by depicting normalcy as a performance polished by social and medical institutions. Humanizing complex conditions, work such as Country Cooks, The Way She Feels provide rare, honest insight into misunderstood conditions like borderline personality disorder, in short it is BPD, making them feel less scary or taboo. Critiquing clinical systems, many authors, including Clem and Oliver Martini in Bitter Medicine, use their stories to expose the inadequacies and dehumanizing aspects of the healthcare system. Graphic memoirs fight mental illness stereotypes by using personal narrative and visual metaphors to replace sensationalized, media driven violence incapacity with nuanced life experiences. These first hand accounts, often called graphic medicine, reclaim the narrative from medical authorities to show the subjective complex reality of conditions like OCD, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. Important graphic memoirs challenging stereotype. And the examples are Marble, Mania, Depression, Michelangelo, and Me by Ellen Forney explores bipolar disorder, focusing on the intersection of creativity, stability, and the fear of losing oneself through medication. Then Psychiatric Tales by Daryl Cunningham, a former healthcare worker, provides a nuanced view of various mental health conditions, humanizing those in psychiatric care. Third is RX, a graphic memoir by Rachel Lindsay, critiques the corporate and biomedical view of mental illness and patient agency. Bitter Medicine, a graphic memoir of mental illness by Clem and Oliver Martini, details the experience of living with schizophrenia and navigating the healthcare system. Look Straight Ahead by Ellen Will focuses on depression and mental health in adolescence. Sanity is Performance suggests that appearing sane is a social act or pretense designed to seem safe to others, rather than a reflection of internal mental states. It implies that we manage our behaviors to conform, keeping inner thoughts private to avoid social rejection. Origin, often attributed to theater director Keith Johnstone in his book Improvisation and the Theater, who argues sanity is a learned behavior to avoid being deemed insane by the group. The Masked highlights that fiction often feels slightly crazy internally but hide this to conform to social expectations. Safety versus truth. The performance is about appearing safe rather than being truly rational. Context, used in psychology, arts, and literature to describe the tension between internal experiences and social conformity, particularly concerning mental health levels. Social function, it functions as defense mechanism ensuring acceptance. Now, what are the key perspectives of this particular aspect? Keith Johnstone argues that sanity is a pretense we maintain to avoid social rejection. He suggests that most people secretly feel crazier than average but expend immense energy maintaining a shield of normalcy. In his view, when we meet others, we often confuse their outward performance of sanity with their true internal self. Rachel Lindsay uses this phrase to describe the experience of living with bipolar disorder while working a corporate job. In a memoir, she depicts herself tap dancing for psychiatrists to prove her stability, highlighting how sanity is often a socially enforced script one must follow to be granted freedom and agency. Third is social and cultural context. This idea aligns with the belief that normality is a social construct rather than a fixed medical state. Philosophers and critics often point out that behavior deemed insane in one person might be tolerated as eccentricity in another, showing that sanity is defined by the observer's perception of safety and predictability. There are some related philosophical ideas too, and one of them is performativity. The concept echoes Judith Butler's theory of performativity, which suggests that many aspects of our identity, like gender or social standing, are constructed through repeated actions and performances rather than being innate. The pathology of normalcy, psychoanalyst Eric Forman used this term to describe how entire societies can be insane even if their members appear normal because they are all performing the same dysfunctional social role. Mental health narratives play a vital role in how societies understand and address mental health condition. These narratives are deeply rooted in culture, media, literature, and everyday conversations, and they can either help reduce stigma or reinforce harmful misconceptions about mental health. Arthur W. Frank argues that narratives are essential for shaping public perception because they provide framework for understanding and communicating about illness. In many cultures, mental health issues are linked to deep-seated taboos, often associated with concept of madness, danger, and weakness. This association contributes to a widespread culture of fear and misunderstanding surrounding mental health. So this is all for this lecture. In the next one, we will continue with theoretical aspects and components of graphic autopathography. Till then, thank you very much. Let us meet in next lecture.